Making music is a reaction to the world, well, surrounding you, and the world has changed. In what way do you have an example of a song, or maybe how you wrote a song that was a reaction to the world outside?
Well, I think a song like Wanderlust, which is the first song on the record, is very much a kind of a manifesto song. You know what I mean? I think it's very much a song made under a conservative right-wing government who are kind of consolidating all the wealth in the, you know, and I think it's a sense of like a little bit of a sense of breaking the windows, you know, and I think probably a song like Daughters says the same sort of thing about like kind of you know, the people in, you know, the ones who are I guess, you know, like solidarity with the people at the bottom of the food chain and contempt for those at the top, you know, and I think that's something that's become very apparent in Britain in the last few years. The kind of the dismantling and the vandalism, all the things which we thought, you know, people think, which are there to help people, you know, and so in a more broad sense, the record is kind of a reflection of being able to take things from unusual sources, like you know, previously we'd kind of looked at the so-called high art forms, you know, like literature, film, you know. And now we kind of like quoting lyrics from like, you know, funny dog memes and like you know, and quotes from like, you know, hits, videos with hits on YouTube and stuff, and it's just kind of like having those channels open and having those in both a lyrical and musical sense, like being able to incorporate more things into what you do, because I think that's a artistically sound way of working in. It's you know, a response to the kind of the overload of information we get today.
I wrote down lines from songs. Well, you named Wanderlust. We're decadent beyond our means, I think is the first line. That's, who is that about? Who is the we?
We as a gang, I think. It's about us as people and our kind of resourcefulness and our approach to creativity, I think, is we're kind of big believers in self-sufficiency, and I think that if there's you should be able to, your works should be born out of unlikely situations, I think. So we should be making, the ideas are bigger than the sources in a way, and you know, we're children of our time, really. We're impatient workers. We like to work with immediacy, and so a song like Wanderlust could quite easily be done with a proper choir and an orchestra, but that for us is a kind of very lavish and anti-art way of doing it. We prefer to get a piece of software or a synthesizer and make it ourselves, and that handcraftedness is kind of key to it, and there's a beauty to that I think and the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, in a kind of cliched sense. It is what you say it is, and for us that's our kind of orchestral piece in a way. But, yeah. So, and also, you know, sorry.
Was it hard to limit yourself?
Yeah, yeah, because computers have blown apart. You know, what is kind of doable. You know, I think we have kind of accepted that computers are to our generation what, you know, electric guitars probably were to the 60s generations. They kind of bring with them a huge amount of possibilities, and with possibilities become dangers. And you know, I think we kind of feel it feels fun to risk disaster. You know, we're only ever one hipster hand clap away from becoming something kind of grotesque and very, you know, very now. Yeah. You know, being current and trying to be relevant are difficult feats to kind of balance.
Yeah, because you also need to have some sort of timelessness.
Well, I think you also need to, you need to not be not change with the wind. You know what I mean? You need to have a core to what you do, and you can incorporate other things, and you're supposed to change over time, but you're not supposed to change with fashion. Yeah. You know, you're supposed to kind of, incorporate things you find interesting. Not ignore the modern world, but not be slave to it either.
Daughters, there's a line I thought was interesting. I didn't know exactly what you meant, so that's why I wrote it down. Just a little girl and Jesus was a woman.
Well, that song in general is about is kind of about the meek inheriting the earth, and about the destruction of the power structures by those at the bottom. and very much a song influenced by like living in London and what an unfair city it is, what an expensive city it is, and the sort of poverty and squalor you see every day, and people and going past gleaming skyscrapers, you know, and I think it's a play on it's a play on mythology, you know. I think about the meek inheriting the earth, you know, the idea that the myth of, you know, I went to Sunday school as a kid, you know, the myth of Jesus about like him kind of offering no resistance to the destruction placed on him. But I think I wanted to, that story makes much more sense in the modern terms if you've cast Jesus as a woman, you know what I mean? Because frankly, women have a rawer deal than men do in most parts of the world, you know. I think I think that story makes a lot more sense if you cast both God and Jesus as women.
Just like John Lennon saying in the 70s, a woman is a nigger of the world.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, it's the same kind of sentiment as that. Like, because we know that like whatever hardships we have to befall, you know, there are people worse off. Frankly, you know.
Maybe it's a stupid question, but do you treat women as equal, or is it something because sometimes people say you treat women as equal, but we are in a male-based society?
Of course. Yeah. Well, it's very difficult to be to call yourself a male feminist. That's an extremely difficult thing to call yourself. But I mean, in whatever way we can, and yes, we absolutely are. You know.
I'm not here to judge, Sean. I don't know. The album is called Present Tense. When during the writing and recording of the album, when was this album title chosen?
Well, there's a song now called Past Perfect, which and the working title of that was Present Tense, and we talked about being able to wait for the good days, and I think a lot of we tried to make a positive album because it felt like positivity is a difficult thing to attain in music. It's hard to be positive and be sincere in music, whereas maybe it's a little easier with kind of melancholy and because there aren't the same signposts with positivity.
How come? Because many artists say that.
I think because the signposts are so familiar with sadness, and happiness is not as puristic a feeling as sadness. I don't think happiness is out of sadness, whereas sadness isn't because of happiness.
No.
You don't feel sad despite happiness, but you feel happy despite sadness.
Well, no one has to. No one has to think about it when you say, "Have you attained sadness?" But if you ask someone, "Have they attained happiness?" You know, nobody knows what to say. It's a much more difficult thing to even approach, let alone find. You know.
So we talked about notions of being in the now and being content with the now, because memory has a habit of editing out the bad bits, and it's easy to be nostalgic and to look back and things to seem pretty good. And we also live with the shadow of the future hanging over. We live very much aware of how our future is going to play out. So I think songs in a way become ways for people to live in the now. They elongate time, and I think the songs are kind of conversations on that, about very brief fragments of time. Like there's a song like Pregnant Pause, for instance, which is very much about that kind of lucid moment you have often after like a heavy night, and you wake up and things strangely feel very clear in their place. And but they're very fleeting moments, and I think it's kind of creative people's job to notice those fleeting moments and to capture them. And you can never capture them fully. They're always kind of, it's only ever an artist's impression of the villain.
But you said pregnant. Is that the word for it, pregnant pause? Because I don't know the...
Pregnant pause is a kind of term that means in anticipation of something. You hold back in anticipation that something is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's like you hold your breath.